There we
Welcome everyone. I'm Michael Naylor, and I'm the director of the Maine Enneagram Center for Transformation and Well-Being. And I'm here today with my dear friend Margy, Type 9, who's going to give us her story. You know, the agony, the ecstasy, the good, the bad, challenges, gifts, etc. And so just really happy to be with you today. And Margie, why not, maybe begin with, your childhood. What you noticed about nineishness when you were just a little girl?
Looking back, um, I I've always been a type nine, and my mom used to say to me, and this was the highest compliment. I was one of six kids, and so they're
And you just shut your
quite
audio.
there.
So you were
I don't
one
know
of,
why it's meeting. I'm not doing anything,
really,
but
it's just happening.
it's happening.
It's like most things. Well, okay. So you're one of six kids.
One of six kids, and so of course. Uh, Six kids, six types. And my mom used to say to me, "You've never caused us any trouble." And that was the highest compliment she thought she could pay me.
Hmm.
And I took it as a compliment. But as I have learned more and more about uh, the Enneagram and my own self awareness, I know um, that type nines can sacrifice not causing any problems for not articulating needs that need to be met.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. I am the second oldest of six children, and I was the first girl. So being born into a family with a Hispanic mother, of course, of course, the boys rule.
Oh.
And uh, I caught on to that right away. I followed type three, very strong type three. And so the sun rose and shone on him. And I learned early on my job was to not steal any of the sunshine from him.
Oh, well, so if you think about, when you were just a little girl or a teenager, how did that nineishness show up at school or around other people?
um, it showed up at school. Uh, People were always very ready to tell me what was going on, especially if they didn't feel right or their feelings were hurt.
Hmm.
And I think of type twos as being compassionate, but I think type nines are compassionate also. We're
Hmm.
just not are primarily in the heart triad, but we are in the instinctual triad. And I can really, in a room full of people, I can just even now glom on to who might need to talk or who might need to
Hmm.
unburden. And so the compassion was a part of my nineness. Um, I think type nine, are interesting. We seem to be very pliable, that we go along with everything.
Hmm.
And we do that for us to a certain extent until we don't. And then when I say enough or I dig my my heels in, there's no way to budge me.
Yeah, yeah. So very strong stubbornness
Yes.
when you're really committed to
And
something.
almost irrational stubbornness
Mm,
at times, just being stubborn
hmm hmm
for the
Yeah.
sake of it. So,
So it's almost like two sides of a coin. That part where you can sort of go along with and be, really accommodating, which is a gift. Some types really could learn a lot by trying a little bit of that, like the type eights. But then doing it to a fault, you can end up losing yourself, and then somewhere in there you buckle down and go, "I'm hell no, you can't move me. I'm rooted in the earth, and don't even try." And so it's an interesting continuum. And anything in particular that would move you towards that sense of, stubbornness, and I guess we could say sometimes about the instinctual types that they have a strong message they give out, which is "don't mess with me without my permission," and so I wonder if something in there just goes off on you and you kind of had it.
yes, I think that 90% of my life experience takes place in my gut, in my belly.
Mm.
I get a sense in my belly of, we have walked a mile too far here. And so I then will dig my heels in, and it may not, usually it's not about the issue that that really set me off, but it'll be about some piddly issue. And people look at me like, what? You're, you're not going to do that? So it's disproportionate, the stubbornness and sometimes anger is disproportionate for the issue at hand.
Mm.
But there has been a truckload of issues before it that led me to dig my heels in over this small thing.
Yeah, so it's like something tips the scales, and you're
Yes,
like, no, we're not moving forward like this anymore.
yes.
And you know,
It's the straw that breaks the camel's back.
yeah, yeah, I can imagine that I may not be able to spot it before it goes into a deep response of either anger or just buckling down. So I know people have often remarked that when the nine gets angry, they're often surprised, like, "Whoa, you're angry? That I didn't realize you had that in you." It says, "Oh, yes, I do."
Yes,
Hmm.
yes,
Okay. Well, I wonder if you could say a little bit about, how you discovered the Enneagram, and what that was like for you.
yes. I was volunteering when I lived in Fresno, California. I was volunteering in the pastoral care department of a hospital. And I saw a notice in the pastoral care office, a flyer on the wall that said, "Would you like to learn how to avoid conflict in your life?" I thought, oh my gosh, where is this person? Sign me up right now, because that would be the answer to life. That would be, I could live the rest of my life in peace. And so I then spoke with the chaplain who was teaching it, and he said, "Well, I'm teaching this theory. I think it was like 1998." He said, "I'm teaching a theory, and I think you'd be interested in it." And so you bet I was there at that first meeting. What he would do is describe each number, starting with the one, and he would then play a tape. Remember cassette tapes?
I
He would
do.
play a cassette tape where Don Risso described the types.
Mm.
I was fascinated and hooked. I remember when I came in late to the meeting where the type 9 was described, and I thought, as I heard him describing it, oh my God, who would ever want to be like that? That is just horrible. And anyway, he's then said, and that's my type, and that's the type 9.
Oh, wow.
So I realized
Hmm.
that, you know what, that was my type also. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Well, what about, so maybe you could say a little bit about what, I mean, I had the same experience when I learned that I was a type 4. It was sort of horrifying. But so, like, what were some of the traits that you didn't like discovering?
What I didn't like was, I think, I don't know if this is the terminology that was used, but it sounded like the type 9 was wishy-washy.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
it sounded like the type 9 was indecisive. And my unconscious recognized that right away. And that's why I was so repulsed by it, because it is difficult, usually difficult for me to make a decision. I have to I have to really spend time. I want to say thinking about it, but it isn't as much thinking as it is kind of processing it in my body. Um,
mm,
and I can pick out a person who can't make a decision, I mean, in a nanosecond, because um, the expression, if you spot it, you got it, holds very true for me.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I'm trying to think of other things, that other qualities. There were qualities that I really liked, and that was the quality of bringing peacefulness to other people.
Mhm,
Um, I that has been such a value for me. I think an unconscious value, so that I have found at times that if I have a need or if I have a problem, I'm I'm almost ashamed of it, because somehow I gave myself the job. I signed up for keeping the whole damn world peaceful. And that's kind of a big job, not to mention an impossible job. But so I always felt guilty if I thought I was breathing more oxygen than
mm,
my allotted portion.
yeah. So it kind of goes along the lines of some nine saying it was not okay for me to be too visible or seen, or like you say, take up the space. Like the people around me, they can take up the space, but I'm not allowed to for whatever reasons. And sometimes there's a backstory where they had to stay invisible because of challenges in the family, but also in healthier families, there's just some sort of orientation towards shielding my light so it doesn't get too big or head me towards the direction of type 3 where I'm shining like a bright star. So how did that affect, your activities, growing up? Was there where did your interest go? What was your passion as you're trying to save the planet from its negativity that seems to be growing madly these days.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you about something that happened in my life when I was 18. It was, I was graduating from high school. Now, I had been to a Catholic grade school and high school. So I had had 12 years of Catholic education. And I got accepted, and it was impossible for me to go away to college because of uh, family finances. So I was going to go to the University of New Mexico, and I went there for a year. But I remember at the end of my senior year in high school thinking, what's next? I mean, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff
Hmm.
and I couldn't go back. I couldn't back up because the army was pushing me toward the cliff and I didn't want to jump off. And I'd probably still be standing there if time hadn't moved on and several months later it was time to go to college. So college, okay, I was a freshman in college in the fall of 1965, which was the cultural uh, revolution of the 60s. I had been rather uh, protected from all of that
Hmm.
in going in the Catholic school where I went.
Hmm.
But I went to the University of New Mexico and I felt like I was in the middle of Sodom and Gomorrah. And there were National Guard troops on campus.
Mhm.
The war in Vietnam was raging.
Mhm.
It was a very unsettling time. So, what would a type 9 do in a situation like that? Well, this type 9 decided at the end of that for 1966 year, I would go to the convent because the convent was as far removed from the UNM campus as one could get. And
Amazing.
that's what I did
Huh.
for 3 years.
And that so you were in the convent for 3 years studying to be officially announced as a nun, or did you
Yes.
do that?
Yeah. I didn't, I left a couple months before vows. So
Mhm.
I never became a nun. But I
Mhm.
was thinking how it's interesting how my type played a part in that.
Oh yeah.
If you feel as though you're going to be in my life, if I felt like I would be annihilated by something, I would change course uh, to make it to get me out of the chaos, to get me out of the unrest,
Hmm.
and uh, I don't know why my computer keeps doing that, Michael. It
Not to
just
worry.
muted.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm thinking, is there a spirit in this?
there is. Sometimes it acts up more than others, so
Yes, I think,
we're a target today.
yeah. But I wanted to tell you about something else that I noticed. I mean, here I am in my uh, late 70s, and I'm still learning
Hmm.
about what this type is. And uh, I'm happy that my awareness has not shut down yet. But I've always kind of wrestled with the idea of being a type 9 and the descriptor mediator. And I was thinking, how how am I a mediator? Because I've always thought of as a mediator as someone who settles who settles conflicts between two people.
Yeah.
Well, I noticed that there's a different definition, and that when I noticed this when I was out a long, long walk with people, and there would be a group of people up ahead of me, and then a group of people behind where I was walking. And I found myself probably walking twice as far because I was going back and forth between the two groups.
Hmm.
So somehow I think that that is a form of the definition of mediation. Also,
Yeah.
also at dinner with a large group of people, I've been aware of this before, but never attributed it to my type 9 number. And it's that I will not really partake in a conversation per se. So there will be a group of people on my right and a group of people on my left,
Hmm.
and maybe another group across the table. And I am kind of solo, but listening to bits of
Hmm.
each conversation.
Hmm. Interesting.
And it's exhausting.
And is there like a motive in it? Is it something around I need to know what's going on all three to keep peace amongst in the atmosphere of the room, or is it that conscious, or is it just something you find yourself doing?
It's something I find myself doing, but I think that I might be scanning for conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, they're talking about such and such. Is that uh, uh, is that a hot topic?
Hmm.
Is that something that is going to disturb the peace? Hey, we're supposed to be having a meal together here. This is not a contentious discussion about anything. So I think that part of that is nineness. Besides being a nine, uh, my primary instinct is self-pres.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be self-pres also. It's like a double whammy,
Yeah.
you know, the nine and self-pres.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
any anything for protection.
Mm-hmm. Uh, So, uh, how would you describe your sensitivity to having your peaceful aura messed with, or your inner peace? You know, what kind of sensitivity do you have to external factors that might mess with it, or your own inner world that might mess with whatever the stable ground that you like to rest in, assuming that that's true for you? And a lot of nines would say, I develop a stable ground, doesn't go too high, doesn't go too low, but don't tread on it if you can help it. So I just wondered what your experience was along those lines.
Well, I feel very internally bothered um, when I am in my peaceful place, which is in my office. And if somebody says, "Oh, we need to take," like my husband will say, "We need to take a look at something, uh, something that the house needs, or something that banking needs, or whatever," and it's like, don't pull me out of this. And I feel an inner resistance, like, how could you do that? And so I would say that yes, I feel resistance
Hmm.
when anybody tries to pull me out of that place.
Yeah. And you notice that throughout your life there's been a tendency not to get too excited and up and or not let yourself get too inspired internally because it starts messing with this safe place you have.
Yes. When I'm around like a type 7 son who gets so enthusiastic and so excited, I there's a part of me that goes, okay, okay, let's tamp that down a little bit. Or if somebody is in the doldrums and is enjoying being there, it's like, come on, let's lift it up a little bit. So it's finding that. I guess that the place is kind of like a shallow stream
Hmm.
that I can wade that I wade into, and I'd like to walk in this shallow stream always. And please, we don't want a flood here. We don't want anybody to get too excited and think, oh, let's put a canoe in the water, you know, or I don't want uh, the shallow creek bed to run dry.
Mm,
So
yeah, it's very interesting. Different, just an interesting sort of way of being in the world from time to time. So one of the things that nines have sometimes said to me that they can have a hard time because of the need for that kind of intermediate, safe, comfortable place, a challenge around locating what they're passionate about, what they feel, drawn to in a strong way. Uh, and I don't know if that's an accurate description, but there's something along the lines, the story being, point of growth is going towards three, where you acknowledge your heart's desire and this is what I want. It doesn't have to be an extroverted seven experience. It can be a quiet, steady burning. But I wondered for you, how you notice what passion, how it shows up inside of you, or if there's a particular interest that feels like it's a passion of yours.
yeah, um, I can tell when I go to type 3
Hmm.
and my passion is ignited. And I'll tell you what my passion is. And when I'm in my passion, I I lose contact with my surroundings, really. I forget that I'm in the creek and it's okay for the water to come up to my neck.
Hmm.
Um, and it's like my body, I can feel my body switch gears.
Huh.
And it's as though, remember on the old manual transmissions where you would have the little stick coming out of the steering wheel, the base of the steering wheel.
Yeah.
I can feel when I put it into a higher gear.
Oh, interesting.
And it's a when that happens, I mean, it comes with so much enthusiasm.
Hmm.
It comes with my talent, my skill set get ignited.
Hmm.
And what comes to mind for me is my job was I was a hospital chaplain, and the craziest, most wild place in the hospital is the emergency room. I I thrived in the emergency room. All hell would be breaking loose. I mean, all kinds of injuries, all kind people dying,
Hmm.
uh, families having just total breakdowns. And I was in my element
Hmm.
because I felt as though my body held a placid lake of water.
Oh.
And I brought that
Hmm.
into the room
Hmm.
with a family
mm,
or into the room where a wife is with her husband who just died,
mm,
or so it's almost paradoxical, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah, it is.
That someone who craves peace and wants to find that peaceful place can function at my best
Yeah, that's
in a
interesting.
place like that.
Yeah, well, that's so interesting. I've noticed that, like my daughter's a type 9, and when conflict is occurring, she just has this, it's like a Jedi skill for just calming the waters and just sort of going, and I don't know how she does it, but everybody chills out, and there's a way that they start acting reasonable towards each other. And I've had a couple of counselors that, addiction counselors who could just walk into a room and could just bring a stillness with them when everybody was really suffering in early recovery and just coming undone. And they would walk in and everybody would relax. So there's some kind of powerful spiritual gift, I think, that comes with the paradox of being a 9, that it
Yes,
seems to turn on at the right times.
yes.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And it's very powerful, too. And I often correlate it with something about the instinctual center and being able to kind of emit a kind of calmness through their instinctual center, whereas, eights emit a kind of high charged energy,
High
robust.
frequency.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But anyway, so that's interesting. And so being a chaplain in the ER, sounds like it just really, you felt a great harmony there being in that situation. And so was there a particular spiritual path that you had followed after Catholicism that, built upon your skills as a chaplain, or what happened?
Um, I think being a chaplain made me much more spiritual
Hmm.
because I saw life and death and unwanted outcomes. Uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
I saw, the hard stuff. I
Yeah.
worked for a while. I worked oncology
Hmm.
in the bone marrow transplant unit, and
Wow.
that was the last chance for a lot of people. And
Hmm.
at the time when I was working there, bone marrow transplants did not work for many people.
Hmm.
Um, I I think it made me dig deeper, and I have a meditation practice even now that I believe really feeds that groundedness
Hmm.
and gives me. I always say it gives me another 3 seconds before I react.
Hmm. Hmm.
And any time before reaction is very helpful time, I think.
Hmm.
Um, I guess I was part of an order of nuns that I entered, many, many years ago, but we are still connected to each other. We still hear from each other.
Hmm.
And I think that we look for deeper things than meet the eye.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, yes. And being a chaplain made me realize, we can't put a higher power, God, whatever we call our higher power, in a box. God is so much bigger than any box
Hmm.
we would try to put God in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, can you say a little bit about how the study of the Enneagram has been of service to you?
Oh, the studying the Enneagram, uh, it was really the key. It gave me a key to unlock so many conundrums. I think that there's a story at the very beginning of the book, The Wisdom of the Enneagram, where uh, the story is told about someone being in prison, and the prisoner's wife says, "I'm going to give you something, and there's a key to get you out." And she gives him, I think, a prayer rug or something. Well, he thinks, a key to get me out. Well, he realizes that there is a key woven into the prayer rug.
Huh.
And so that is the key. That's what the Enneagram
Mm,
has been for me.
mm,
Uh, it has helped me so much not to personalize. And so that flyer that I saw in 1998 was correct, that it has taught me uh, something I learned in a 12 step program, and that is that 90% of what people think, feel, say, and do is about them and not about me.
yeah.
And I think that the Enneagram not only gave me that information, but it also gave me a blueprint, kind of a template for how that type might function. And
Mm,
so
mm,
it's taken a lot of the surprise out of interacting with people.
yeah. Yeah.
And it's made me dig deep. So there are wonderful things about being a nine, but there is also the agony. And I know that the agony is uh, when I go to type six, when I start worrying about outcomes and will have a sleepless night because I have worried that this will happen and that will happen.
Hmm.
Um, I think one of the descriptors is that type nines perseverate. And so I thought, okay, perseverate comes from persevere. And so it means that I persevere in worrying about every possible horrible outcome
the, the
that can,
shadow of the six, isn't it? Yeah.
yes,
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting thing. I think nines have said to me is that when I'm really stressed, I can still look like a calm nine on the outside, but internally I can be, worried like a type six and just going back and forth. But people may not know that I'm worried because there's just something about my nineness that keeps a calm front,
yes.
yeah.
One image that I have, I think I read it somewhere, is that type nines are like ducks on a placid lake,
Oh, interesting.
and that above the surface, they look so calm, so peaceful, but their feet underneath are going 900 miles an hour.
That's a great image. That's a great image. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Well, so one of the things we talk about, as you know, is the emotional passion of it's sometimes called sloth. Another word for it is disengagement, and seems that it's ultimately attached to a definition where the nine develops a habit of not attuning to what enlivens them, but going along and somehow even numbing down unconsciously what their what their what their wish is. And so sloth, I've heard people say, yeah, the nine energy, it's kind of like, when you get in the car and you drive, across town and then you can't remember where you went, or, so it's
How
sort
you
of
got there?
how you got there, kind of disassociating, and going off into some kind of dream, or it can be, I think there's something around, I've heard people say, well, yeah, I can start on a project and it can be as boring as can be, but I just keep going in it and I get lost in it. And at the end of the day, I don't really remember being there. I'm not particularly satisfied, but I had no unexpected, troublesome moments. But when you hear that word sloth or disengagement, what comes up for you as what you've experienced?
So, sloth to me means laziness. And so, if anyone describes me as lazy, it is such a trigger
Mm,
for me
hmm
because it means, that I'm not doing my work, that I'm uh, living off the system or whatever. So
mm,
the word lazy is uh, particularly onerous for me. Um, I think that where sloth affects me as a type 9 is that I have to kick it into gear to sometimes to continue meditation, to dig deep and find out, okay, what is the real motivation here?
mm,
Uh, what be honest, just brutally honest about what is it that motivates you to do this? Is
mm,
it you want people to think well of you? Is
mhm,
it uh, to please people? What is it? But you mentioned something about uh, disassociation, and oh my gosh, I am so good at that.
mhm,
I can be physically present. I can even make eye contact, nod my head, and I am not there.
mhm,
If another person, say, is giving a presentation, so I'll look at the presenter,
mhm,
but in my mind, I may be making my grocery list
mhm,
or thinking about something that happened a couple days ago or something that is going to happen, but not be present. And I always think, oh, yeah, people don't know. People must know that because when people do the same thing to me,
You're
I
sensitive.
am very, very aware of it.
Well,
Um,
there's something about nines that can sort of give the calm face as a way of hiding out. I don't think it's a conscious thing. I was just thinking of one guy I worked with for years, well, in a men's group, and he was so good at acting like everything was fine, even though his life was on the line. He had no money, he lost his family, but he would act so together and not create any ripples that would have me say, "Hey, Tom, how are you doing?" And then I think it was after a couple of weeks I noticed I hadn't even called on him. He would so blend in so well. He just knew how to move about. And he said, I learned that when I was in first, second grade. The teachers would never call on me because I knew how to kind of create that sense that you don't need to call on me. I'm fine here. So sometimes that's a powerful disguise and maybe a survival. If I've grown up in a traumatic family, it's probably a good idea to be able to put that invisibility cloak on so I don't get, annihilated or harmed. But
mhm.
is that anything that you relate to in terms of, going invisible or even being able to do that when you want to?
Absolutely. Sometimes I do it on purpose,
Hmm.
and sometimes I have to say, oh, and bring myself back
Yeah.
uh, and I try to, again, feel my feet. This is where I am.
Hmm.
This is what's happening.
Mm.
Um, I have a real um, kind of a fight with reality if I don't like the reality, I can so easily exit.
Yeah, yeah. So that you're not sort of being consciously affected by that environment.
Mhm.
It's almost like slipping away into another
Yes.
channel or something.
It's like I have the form of me is there, and I even try to establish eye contact. But hey, I left the room 5 minutes ago.
Yeah. Well, that's what we hear people say, that nines are the one type that can leave the room without even leaving the room.
Yes.
And, whereas the fours go storming out, and the nines do it in this quiet, sort of subtle way. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. I've noticed that kind of disassociation if, let's say, for instance, my wife is upset about something and I don't want to hear it. Like there's something in me that just doesn't hear it. It's almost like I just look away. And she may poke me on the shoulder and say, "Hello, are you in there?" And the answer is, "No, I am not."
Yeah.
But it's a similar kind of disengaging,
Yes.
because we use that term a lot too, this idea of I disengage from my lived life, my felt life, and I, go into an alternate reality. And what do we say? The move is to go into engagement, engaging the world. So has that been a theme for you, the idea of engaging and moving towards what you care about? Has that been a theme that you've experienced?
Yes. And it is, I have experienced that. And it has been a very valuable tool
Hmm.
at times, because it has protected me from people's rage,
Hmm.
from angry outbursts. But I now make try to make it a choice rather than just escaping. Um, what comes to mind is that uh, my son, who's a type 7, has such passion and enthusiasm for just about everything. And how he, when he's starting in on one of his, it's not a tirade, it's an enthusiastic presentation. And uh, I can do that very easily. Like, okay, you just go on and on and on. I've heard this 100 times, but you go on and on, and I will look like I'm standing here.
Hmm.
And then what I notice he does when I'm when he's on to me, he'll touch my shoulder or my arm, like, get back here.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Well, I'm just curious about what are the things that really touch your heart, that move you and bring you that sense of, loving meaning in the world? Like how would you describe that part of your experience?
I think that justice, like, I think I still carry with me what I learned from my sisters in the Dominican convent I
Mm,
was part of, and went through 3 years of formation there, that justice is important.
mm,
Um, my heart gets touched by when people are truly suffering. Um,
mm,
I have a passion for that.
mm,
Um, I have a I have a passion for my children and my husband.
mm,
I have been very gifted with those relationships. Sometimes they were hard,
mhm,
sometimes they were very difficult, but I'm thankful for them the way they are today.
mhm, mhm. And when you think about if you look at the overview of your life from when you were a little girl to who you are now, and when I do that with looking at my type 4 patterns, I see some pretty big shifts in the middle of that arc where some I learned about the Enneagram, then started
Yes,
becoming aware of my interesting, volatile inner life and how I so identified with it. And then, went through a lot of inner work to finally get to a place where, I'm more able to navigate being a human being and not be so self absorbed. Do you notice any kind of arc of growth when you look at your whole life?
well, I have been so fortunate in my life. I believe that I was offered opportunities um, for growth.
Hmm.
And I have done a lot of work on myself.
Hmm.
I believe if I hadn't gone away for those 3 years to the convent, uh, at the time that I went, it's like uh, the Catholic Church was opening up after centuries,
Hmm.
and they realized the importance of good psychological help, good counseling. Um, it opened a whole new world for me.
Hmm.
Uh, I've had the opportunity to attend many workshops, uh, many seminars about personal growth. And, having an Enneagram coach has been wonderful for the
Hmm.
last, I think it's been 11 or 12 years. Uh,
Hmm.
Having people with whom I can be totally, completely myself
Yeah.
and be honest about myself
Yeah.
has been a gift. So, yes, there have been events that precipitated huge growth, but fortunately, there's always been a safety net.
Yeah.
And I might have let go sometime and fallen in the safety net, but there was a net there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did want to mention, Michael, the uh, the fear. I think the fear of type 9, which I find fascinating, and it's the fear of disconnection and that annihilation will happen. So yes, and I have had that personally in my life where people have disconnected, people I love have disconnected from me. And it did feel at times like I would die. However, those were have became the greatest areas of growth for me in my life.
Hmm.
Um, and I think as a type 9 that we shoot ourselves in the foot that because I want to be invisible.
Hmm.
I want to act like I'm not important, but I feel like a knife to my heart when someone doesn't notice me. And it's like, and someone doesn't think I'm important, but I spent my whole time with that person trying to be invisible. It's like, yeah, you can't have it both ways.
Oh, the paradoxes. That's a great one.
Yes. And I think that at this time in my life that I can truly say that so many things in life are not either or, but they are both and.
Mm.
And that paradox is such a part of life.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's the same way that I can say in my own foolishness, like not wanting to look like anybody else. At the same time, hungry to feel like I belong and I'm a part of. And
crazy, isn't
it's like, and doing, and doing the opposite of what might create belonging, and but then having that mixed up with it's just ordinary to belong. It's like, well, which is it for Pete's sake? And I spent at least half my life struggling with that one, wanting to be unique and different, but then complaining because I felt like an outsider. Well, of course, I put myself on the
it?
outside, and if you treat me like I'm just one of your friends, then I'm no longer unique. So it's just crazy making stuff like that, which is
It
quite
is.
funny when you
It's
see
like,
it.
hiding under the invisibility cloak and then being so heartbroken when I'm not picked for the team. Yeah, you
Because you
couldn't
miss me.
find me. That's why.
Oh, well, do you have any, thoughts for, does it ever occur to you, how maybe if you'd had a certain guidance when you were younger about nineishness, that something it would have helped? I mean, if you were going to make a recommendation or not, when people ask me that about fours, I just say stay alive, and things will start to smooth out around age 50.
Isn't that the truth? Um, I would say I wish that, but I don't know if it would have made a difference. I wish that I had been treated as though I were cherished
Hmm.
more.
Yeah.
With six, it was pretty hard to do that. I mean, just you're in, it's survival. It's put three meals on the table a day.
Okay.
And
Wow.
yes,
Brutal.
yeah. So, would it have made a difference? I don't know. But I would tell people with nine children, type nine children, to let them know that you think they're special.
Yes. Yeah. Well, one of the things I've noticed as we're talking, running through your life is, seems to me, it's been a passion, a spiritual passion for knowing the truth and knowing who you are. And, that's been I just wonder how old you were when that first got kind of ignited. Was it going to the convent for those 3 years? Or?
There have been times, I can think of times in my life. I was in high school, and it seems that always when my spirituality was ignited, I was doing like this was one time I was a senior in high school, and we had gone away, the whole class had gone away to a retreat, a spiritual retreat. And I remember that one of the talks was that on God loves us more than many sparrows.
Hmm.
And there's a story in scripture, a parable about how if that God cares about, he doesn't care about the whole flock of sparrows, he cares about each one. And I
Hmm.
remember that made such an impression on me. And I
Hmm.
was thinking, of course it did. I'm a type nine. To have somebody say
Hmm.
that I'm important enough that God loves me
Oh,
specially,
yeah.
made an impression.
Yeah.
And then another time, and again, it was on a type. I had gone on a retreat. I had small children, and on the retreat, I remember having an experience that almost an experience as though while I was meditating, I could feel my heart in my chest grow,
Wow.
and
Mm,
I could, and I just felt such warmth.
something came through.
So, yeah, I don't think I've ever articulated those experiences before.
Yeah, well, it might be interesting just to even review and see if there's moment, but they're kind of like visitations
Yes.
from a deeper part of ourselves or from spirit that remind me that something's going on here other than
Yeah.
my,
Hey, I didn't engineer this. This happened
yeah,
uh, in spite of me.
yeah, yeah. Well, look, it's really a pleasure to talk with you, and I want to make sure we're not ending before you have one or two other things to say. But if you feel complete on this, that's awesome. Just really loved hearing your story and hearing the different nuances. And so that said, I'll send you the link for the interview, and I invite you to take a look at it and just give me the okay, like, yep, thumbs up. This can go out into the public, or not. It's up to you. But just a pleasure to be with you, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael.
Awesome. Many blessings, and I'll just turn this off and let's see.